On the channel, we've already told you about Bjarne Riis's first steps in professional cycling and how he became one of the biggest dopers in history in the 1993 Tour de France. The prime of his career came 3 years later, when he beat Miguel Indurain himself on the road to Hotelcam to win the 1996 Tour de France. The following year, however, the fortunes of the Eagle of Herning changed completely, and he had to relinquish his throne as the king of cycling to his young teammate Jan Ullrich. And in the process he became furiously angry, as if he were the grumpy dwarf from the Snow White fairy tale, and he even destroyed his Pinarello time trial bike. Do you want to know about the rapid decline of Mr. 60? Well, without further ado, let the show begin. Bjarne Riis reached the top of the world in July 1996 after winning the Tour de France in Paris at the tender age of 32 on a telecom team that no one saw coming and ended up being the terror of the French mountains. He was received as a hero in Denmark, and the cycling fever that today feeds Jonas Vingegaard, Kurt Nielsen and Mads Pedersen was created in those massive veins that this bald man doped up to his shaggy eyebrows. So happy did he seem in that car with his wife and baby that the very fine cyclist, then only 63 kilos, decided to be unfaithful to his wife with the handball player Anne Dort, with whom we imagine he would share some of his doping secrets at the highest level. But while his future wife was winning Olympic gold, our alopecia friend was running out of energy at the Atlanta 96 time trial, while the Miguel Indurain that he had crushed just weeks earlier took the gold. Riis lost almost 4 minutes to finish in a very poor 14th place. After competing in criteriums and several small town races, the bald-headed champion went into a depression. His family life fell apart, and he would soon start to become an angry man who only motivated himself to train by watching his VHS videos of his victory at Oudekam. The Danish champion arrived at the team presentation in January in an apparent happiness that could not have been such, since he knew perfectly well that he had to share equipment and medical secrets with a rider much more talented and younger than him, and of the same nationality as his team sponsor. Obviously, we're talking about Jan Ullrich, who, if he had not had to work like a mule for Riis, could have perfectly well won the 1996 Tour de France. The fans knew that, and although Bjarne was the current champion of the French round, the fans in the know were betting on Ullrich, who had the conditions set to have marked a unique epocha for German cycling. So Riis, who used to hide in the depths of a marine abyss in the season of bloodloads, called his favourite doctor, Luigi Cecchini, and asked for a stealth preparation for the 1997 spring. Riis was to be Telecom's sole and exclusive leader for the Tour de France. His first peak of form that year would be in the Ardennes Classics. And while Lance Armstrong and Michele Bartoli won the Flèche Wallonne and the Liège-Bastogne-Liège respectively, the bald Telecom rider pedalled quietly to his real goal, the Amstel Gold Race of Limburg. On a rainy April morning, Riis had the chemistry inside him that he would prove in the Tour de France 3 months later. But he had to face big rivals like Laurent Jalabert, Michele Bartoli and his compatriot Rolf Sørensen, all of whom were undoubtedly specialists in this terrain and the main favourites. With 60 kilometres to go, the current director and legendary doped man Mauro Gianetti attacked on the Cauberg, and with him jumped the Frenchman Laurent Roux, and of course our protagonist of today. 6 other riders joined the breakaway, but Riis didn't care. Nor did he care that he had to stop for a broken wheel spoke 38 kilometres from the finish. He quickly arrived back and attacked steadily, until he gradually went off in the Meuse with his classic big chainring development, completely enraged, as if he was listening to his wife's screams when she found out that the bald man was cheating on her with a stronger athlete than her. He went solo and reached the finish line several seconds ahead of the others, displaying proudly the Danish flag in his jersey as he had done months earlier in the Tour de France. A legendary victory that caused awe in his rivals, but made him believe that he was more than he was, and Riis decided to extend his peak form. the Dane decided to go to several village races in his home country to figuratively blow away the competition. Mainly other Danes who believed Rijs was a legendary hero whose dietary changes and not doping had made him indestructible. The first of these, the first Aarhus Post GP, created by and for the glory of our bald champion, where he condemned the peloton to finish more than 3 minutes down. The second, almost a criterium bought and given away in his hometown, Herning, where children and old people together chanted Bjarne's name in the streets to see that man foaming at the mouth while winning the Middelbank GP. And don't tell me that you don't get goosebumps watching these archive images. Please. Now a little out of shape, he decided to continue competing in the Euskal Bicicleta, a prestigious Spanish competition where the home bubble, Abraham Olano, ended up taking the win, and where Rijs could only finish 5th. Despite these good results, he could not get the anger and the doubts out of his head. Ulrich was still the public's favourite. The German had been far superior to his supposed leader in the Tour de Suisse, and although Rijs knew that it was because he hadn't been carrying the blood bags prepared for France in his last race in the Danish champions jersey, the fans didn't know that. So the pressure mounted in the peloton at the start of the Tour de France, with director Walter Goodfroth saying that the telecom leader would be the one to win it on the road, while Rijs was of the opposite opinion. He, and he alone, would be the leader of the telecom team. The answer to this conundrum came quickly. In the Rouen prologue, Rijs wore the Tour leader's yellow jersey for the last time in his life. He also lost 12 seconds to his teammate Ulrich, who had the full support of his German teammates. Eric Zabel, the man who gave Telecom the most victories, was notoriously grateful to Uli for the work that he did in the sprints. And team heavyweights like Jens Heppner and Udo Boltz knew full well that Rijs would have no chance of winning the Tour if Ulrich was given his freedom. Perhaps that's why not everyone supported the Dane on the second stage, when Rijs was cut off after a crash a few kilometres from the finish, and Ulrich came home in front with several of his German teammates. Boltz, Heppner and the Austrian Totschnig were all protecting Uli, and Rijs lost a minute at the finish line. He was certainly furious that day and began ranting at the media and at the team hotel. That was the moment when Rudi Pevenage and Walter Goodfroth knew that Rijs would never win another Tour, and that he was totally finished, although obviously they didn't tell the media that. Pevenage, being the good Christian that he was already thinking of Uli as leader from the day that Rijs left his lifelong wife. And of course the German had not yet fallen into a spiral of drugs and nightlife. Goodfroth was much calmer and allowed the Rostock man to literally babysit Rijs on the first mountain stage, finishing in Loudonville. There, and despite numerous gestures of effort from the Dane, the public watched in amazement as the red-haired rider in bib number 8 calmly ascended without getting out of the saddle, cols like the Tourmalet and the Val Laron, while he was taking all the air directly in his face. After Richard Virenque's attacks, Rijs fell off the pace and lost 40 seconds at the finish line, and was now almost 2 minutes behind Ulrich. However, Goodfroth continued to defend him until then, claiming that Rijs, and only Rijs, was number 1 on the team. He didn't believe in himself, because even my 3-year-old nephew would be able to identify which of the two riders was in better form. So, at the team meeting, he assured everyone that Ulrich would no longer work for the Eagle of Herning. It was the next day when the gum could not be stretched out any longer, and Jan crushed all his rivals on the ascent to the Ordino Arcalis, full of power and strength in his legs. Rijs was left sitting, without energy, and we could see how, while Ulrich climbed with astonishing ease, the Dane was suffering from the heat and absolutely disjointed in the face, the result of fatigue and loss of power within his own team. In just a few days, he had lost everything that he had worked hard to achieve in 10 years of professional career. He was no longer the team leader. He had lost more than 3 minutes to his new leader and skipper of the Tour de France. He was back to his classic gregario role. The same one that he had in his old days racing for Laurent Fignon's team in exchange for a few sad dollars to eat and to dope. Nevertheless, Rijs kept trying to fight for the yellow jersey, with good performances, like in the Saint Etienne time trial, where he left us one of the funniest images of his career. Yep, he even complained about Jan Ullrich riding his same Pinarello bike in that time trial. Rijs had been part of the development of the time trial bike, and he no longer had it exclusively, because obviously the team managers should have continued to support the grumpy Rijs, even if he had no chance of winning the Tour. He lost another 3 minutes on that day, and his objective was changed. Now he would have to defend Ullrich, and if he had a chance to show off, try to get onto the podium in Paris. He did the former well, as our angry friend was the key to Ullrich not losing time to the doped Festina riders on the legendary Courchevel stage, with a great performance on the Madeleine by a man who got the blood transfusion right on that day. The same would not be true 2 days later. Rijs began a legendary decline despite being in Tour podium positions. Before climbing the Col de la Croix, he began to feel sick, as did other teammates in the classic food poisoning of the crazy 1990s. He had to stop to defecate in a ditch before the climb, and Marco Pantani's Mercatone Uno ripped it up and took advantage of the situation to put Rijs out of action. If his face on the day of Andorra provoked tenderness, on this mid-mountain day the fans felt pity for a man whose cocktail of drugs had destroyed him. In sweltering heat, Rijs tried to get back with the favourites by trying to buy riders from the Ceramica Refin team and asking several compatriots to return past favours, but to no avail. At the finish in Freiburg, the Dane arrived with more than 6 minutes of disadvantage on the group of favourites and lost any chance of the podium. The bald man's anger was so great that the veins were swelling on his spectacular forehead. But there was still the icing on the cake of shit that he had literally created in that 1997 Tour de France, the final time trial in Euro Disney. Discouraged at not being able to fight for the podium, and even angry at the thought of his beloved Pinarello now riding beneath the new star of world cycling, Rijs went out as if he were a leisure cyclist, and not a professional in that strange time trial. Maybe he wanted to blend in with the childish atmosphere, and inside him the clumsy Pete came out. His bike had numerous breakdowns, and that was the last straw for his patience. Tired of hearing in his head the voices of his ex-wife, of Pevenange, of Ullrich telling him how many women in the street he was going to invite as soon as he arrived in Germany, Rijs got off his Pinarello, worth thousands and thousands of euros, and threw it like a slice of bologna into the gutter. He arrived that day more than 9 minutes behind the winner Abraham Olano, and finished in 7th place. He lost 26 minutes to the yellow jersey of the young Jan Ullrich. Poor Rijs.